these fees as part of his duties as a Trump Organization employee, everything from the work that he had done there to his televised appearances during the campaign. He includes in the lawsuit part of this work, including paying those hush money payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. And Cohen also alleges that this was all part of the agreement for the congressional investigations, for his testimony and cooperation with Robert Mueller's investigation. He's saying that the Trump Organization stopped paying his fees once he agreed to cooperate and switch legal teams. Now, we have not heard back from the Trump Organization. This lawsuit was just filed in court, but Michael Cohen is seeking attorney's fees that he says he was owed under a deal with the Trump Organization as one of its employees, as well as the work that he did for the campaign and after the campaign. Brianna.
All right, I want to bring in CNN legal analyst Carrie Cordero into this conversation. Does he have a basis for this? So it's a suit saying that the Trump Organization failed to fulfill its contractual obligations to indemnify him or pay his attorney fees related to his work there. Does he have a case?
Well, I'll look forward to reading the actual documents. Just hearing about it from Kara now, I have to wonder what the actual contract was. So one question would be, what was that contract? What did it actually say? What were its terms? And then was it actually enforceable? So, for example, we know that the Trump Organization has a practice of using non-disclosure agreements, but oftentimes when those are actually, not with Trump Organization, but more generally, when those types of agreements are litigated, they turn out not to be enforceable. So it really will depend on the terms of the actual agreement that he had and whether or not a court would find that to be an enforceable contract. But I have to wonder what the benefit is to Michael Cohen of bringing this suit at this time. If all he's seeking is legal fees, and again, I'll look forward to reading the actual pleading documents, but if all he's seeking is legal fees, the money that he would spend on the legal fees to bring this suit would sort of perhaps counterbalance that out. So I'm very curious as to what the motivation is for this suit.
That's a good point. All right, Carrie Cordero, thank you so much. Kara Scannell, appreciate that report. From a life of excess to the possibility of life behind bars. From a Python jacket to a prison jumpsuit. Just a short time from now, a federal judge will sentence President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, on convictions stemming from the special counsel's Russia investigation. The sentencing represents a spectacular fall from the pinnacle of American politics. Last summer, a jury convicted Manafort on 5 counts of tax fraud, 2 counts of bank fraud, and 1 count of hiding foreign bank accounts. Political correspondent Sarah Murray is outside of the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia. What's the sentence that he is facing here?
Well, look, prosecutors have asked for him to face up to 25 years in prison. So essentially, Paul Manafort is going to learn today whether he's going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. And prosecutors said that their suggestion for the sentencing really fits the crime. They believe that Paul Manafort has shown very little remorse. They point out the fact that, after they had struck a plea agreement with him, after he was supposed to be cooperating, that he lied to them after the fact. And we haven't heard Paul Manafort speak on his own behalf. He didn't take the stand during the trial in Virginia, and he will have an opportunity to speak one last time in this Virginia courtroom today. He can speak before he is sentenced, and we'll see if he chooses to do so. In filings, he's asked the judge for leniency, and I suspect if he does decide to speak, he will do that again. I mean, this is someone who has been behind bars for 9 months already. He's 69 years old. His health has begun declining. We've seen him at times using a cane, at times using a wheelchair. So this will be sort of his last shot for he and his attorneys today to essentially beg the judge for a shorter sentence than this 25 years prosecutors have asked for. And don't forget, Bree, that this is just the first crack at sentencing. We're going to see him sentenced today in Virginia, but next week he's going to be sentenced before another federal judge in Washington.
Yeah, that's very important to point out. Sarah Murray in Alexandria, thank you. And we're also keeping an eye on Capitol Hill, where there has been a messy debate over an issue that normally wouldn't take much debate: anti-Semitism. This afternoon, the House is expected to vote on a resolution that condemns all forms of hate in the wake of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's remarks slamming pro-Israel groups and politicians. Now, originally, there were plans for a resolution condemning anti-Semitism, but backlash ensued, with several big-name presidential candidates saying that Omar was unfairly being attacked. We have CNN congressional correspondent Sunlen Serfati covering this on Capitol Hill. And Sunlen, we heard from the speaker earlier this morning. Where do things stand now?
Well, it's very clear, Brianna, that House Democratic leadership are very eager to move past this whole episode. They will be having a vote on this resolution at some point later today. And this response was after that controversy originally sparked by Ilhan Omar, but it was really only snowballed for House Democratic leadership into this really nasty inter-party debate and battle where you have Democrats versus Democrats over what exactly should be included in this resolution, what exact language should be in this resolution, and that has led to a very hard 48 hours for House Democratic leaders. Now, we did hear from Nancy Pelosi earlier today, and she was asked if she felt that Ilhan Omar should apologize. She said no, that is really up to her to make that call, and then said this.
I don't think that that the Congresswoman is perhaps appreciate the full weight of how it was heard by other people, although I don't believe it was intended in any anti-Semitic way. But the fact is, if that's how it was interpreted, we have to remove all doubt, as we have done over and over again.
Now, very clear, and I should note that they do not still have the final resolution released to members up here, causing some concern among many members and aides, Brianna, but very clear in listening to Nancy Pelosi that this is going to be a lot broader than they originally thought, not just condemning anti-Semitism, but we heard Nancy Pelosi there say it would condemn anti-Semitism, anti-Islamophobia, anti-white supremacy. That is in direct response to a lot of concern that many members in her caucus, Pelosi's responding to, who felt that it unfairly singled out Ilhan Omar. Brianna.
All right, Sunlen Serfati on the Hill, thank you. And we're following some breaking news in the 2020 race. A little bit of a surprise here. Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio has announced he will not run for president, instead choosing to remain in the U.S. Senate, saying, quote, I will keep calling out Donald Trump and his phony populism. I will keep fighting for all workers across the country. Joining me now, CNN chief political correspondent Dana Bash and Democratic strategist and CNN political commentator Hillary Rosen. Are you surprised by this?
I am surprised, and I don't think I'm the only one who's surprised.
You're rarely surprised. Tell me why.
Look, he was preparing a run. There's no question. He did this Dignity of Work tour. That's what he called his listening tour, and not just in his home state of Ohio, but in the four early caucus and primary states. And he wanted to kind of get a sense of what's out there. And look, he is one of the, when you look at the very, very big field of people, particularly those who have decided to go in, I think it's fair to say there was maybe less of a hankering for a number of people who are in than a Sherrod Brown among a lot of the Democratic voters, because they saw him as somebody who not only strategically can do well among working class Democratic voters, because he's shown he has in his home state of Ohio, but has the right message. I interviewed him on State of the Union a couple of weeks ago. He also has very, very specific ideas, policy ideas that it looked like, and clearly he was preparing for, to be aimed at 2020 voters. So
what do you think about this, Hillary?
I'm glad some Democrat wants to stay in the Senate. I think, Sherrod Brown would be a compelling candidate on paper. A Democrat who won in a pretty red state in Ohio and with good numbers, and that was sort of his sell. But I think beyond that, the progressive lane really is pretty crowded right now in the Democratic primary. He wasn't going into the centrist lane where people argue there's a little more room maybe. I just think probably he looked at it and said, I can have more influence, influencing the candidates who are going to be traipsing through Ohio. Than going on the run itself.
We all know
it's not easy.
It's really, really hard.
It does take, it takes you away from, you can't do both jobs at all effectively.
Yeah,
you have to pick one, and normally it's running for president that gets
picked.
picked.
I'm glad that you said that about staying in the Senate, because you have almost every member now, except for Sherrod Brown, of the Democratic caucus in the Senate running for president. It makes it seem like it's not a place you can do work, but you can.
So in the meantime, Hillary, the New York Times is reporting Joe Biden is 95% committed to running, and his family is on board. So where is he? Where is he now? What's the delay?
I don't know. There's apparently a 0.1% chance that he won't run. But look, Joe Biden is really beloved in the Democratic Party. I think that he does have a lane. People want him to run. He is still polling at the top of the pack. He's got a long history of policy. He's one of those people, maybe unlike Sherrod Brown, where, and I've been with him places over the last year where no matter where he goes, people say, you're going to run, right? You're going to do this, right? Sometimes the problem is nobody ever says don't run to folks like this. But I think Joe Biden is, he's got a lot to offer, and God bless him. I'm happy he's getting it.
No, he has.
He does.
He has a long record, and that's something that we know he's going to have to confront, because one of the speeches that he gave more than 25 years ago is getting a fresh look today. Let's listen.
We have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
So the context here, right, is he voted for the 1994 crime bill, which ushered in the era of mass incarceration that Democrats and Republicans are currently trying to reverse.
We've seen.
How does he explain that?
Well, it's going to be hard. He's going to have to explain it. And we've seen in recent history the candidate you followed around in 2016, Brianna, Hillary Clinton. She wasn't in the Senate.
She said super
she didn't have a
predators,
vote,
and she had to
but she used the
explain
same
that.
language.
Yeah.
She used the same language.
Look, I think he explains it two ways. One, he was actually talking about violent criminals who nobody is for. Let's face it, there's no constituency for a violent criminal. That tape will get taken out of context a lot, but that's what he was talking about. He voted for the bill.
Let's just be clear.
He led it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but let's just be clear. That is a violent crime precipitated by two. You could have drug crimes. Is the third strike. Let's just be clear about what that was.
For sure. But he led that crime bill at a time when crime rate was really high, and the assault weapons ban was in that bill.
Yes, it was.
Violence Against Women Act was in that bill. There was extra money for rehabilitation for drugs in that bill. So there were a lot of things that I think he can say. You know what? You take the good with the bad, and yes, sentencing reform, I think he's been for since then. But look, those two things, the Republicans would do well to pass again, and they've let it lapse. So I don't think he's going to have to apologize forever about this. This is 25 years ago. Crime actually is down, and I think he's made a difference on it.
All right, Hillary Rosen, Dana Bash, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to speak live with one Democratic congressman who has criticized Representative Ilhan Omar, plus former Chief of Staff John Kelly completely contradicting the president on immigration and the separations of families on the border, and more on our breaking news. Michael Cohen suing the Trump Organization in what looks to be the next big fight.
T-Mobile will do the math for you. Right now, when you join T-Mobile, you get 2 lines of unlimited with 2 of the latest phones included for just $100 a month.
Whew, 7 more weeks till the baby comes.
And we still need to renovate the nursery.
And patch that mystery hole.
This is why we SoFi.
With SoFi's no-fee personal loan, borrow up to $100K for home projects.
Oh, I never paid that for a hotel.
Well, how'd you do it then?
Yes.
How?
With Trivago, you can search for the hotel you want. Select the dates, and Trivago will compare the prices for that hotel from hundreds of websites worldwide to find the ideal hotel for you. Hotel Trivago.
Hi, I'm Caleb, and this is my story. I was born with osteogenesis imperfecta, or brittle bone disease. I have broken my bones almost 200 times, and I have had 11 surgeries. But I didn't let that stop me. I love to bike ride, climb, race, and I'm learning how to stand and walk. But I can only do
Lawmakers will vote on a resolution condemning not just anti-Semitism, but all forms of hate. The resolution is following comments by freshman Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar that many viewed as anti-Semitic. Sources described a messy, that is a quote, intense, that is what they said, behind-the-scenes debate over Omar and this resolution. We have Democratic Senator Tom Suozzi with us from Capitol Hill.
You just promoted me, Brianna. You just promoted me to senator.
Oh, I apologize for that. I know you were a congressman, and you're on the House side there. Thank you very much. Right outside of the House chamber.
Thank you.
How difficult is this for Democrats to agree on when you hear these descriptions? People are saying this is messy and intense.
You know, we have to start out with the basic concept that anti-Semitism is real. It's not a made-up thing. It's a real thing in our country. It's a real thing in the world, and it's actually growing right now. So we have to be very, very firm in clearly speaking out against anti-Semitism. And what happened in this instance of Representative Omar, my colleague, having made these apologies in the past for statements that she's made, now doing something again, we have to be very firm and say, you can't do this. It's wrong to question people's loyalty because they're pro-Israel. I'm very pro-Israel, and I'm pro-Israel, and I'm a proud American because Israel is our great ally, and we have to support them every single way that we can.
You have been very vocal. Last month, after the first controversial tweet that Congresswoman Omar made about political donations and the pro-Israel lobbying group AIPAC, where she trafficked in an anti-Semitic trope, you tweeted this. Representative Omar's tweet yesterday went too far to suggest that pro-Israel support is all about the Benjamins, and her follow-up that she is referring to AIPAC is not only inaccurate, but conjures up the worst anti-Semitic stereotypes. I wonder, in her most recent comments, do you distinguish between before, where she's clearly trafficking in anti-Semitic stereotypes, and then her comments that are more critical of Israel, or is what she said in the past just makes whatever she says about Israel problematic in your view?
Yeah, it's you know, she's a member of the United States Congress. She's 37 years old. She knows what she's doing, and she's made these statements in the past. She has to be much more careful going forward because people are listening very carefully to what she says. This is like, you know, President Kennedy, when he ran for president, they said, oh, if he becomes the president, he's going to have a phone call to the Pope to ask what to do. My father went through this as an Italian American. People questioning his loyalty, fought in World War II as an Italian American. We're fighting Mussolini, and they're questioning his loyalties as an Italian American. This is a real problem. And with Jewish population, we have to understand there are 2.5 billion Christians in the world. There are 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. There are 900 million Hindus in the world. There are 300 million Buddhists in the world. There are only 15 million Jewish people in the world. And 6 million got killed during the Holocaust. It's no wonder that people are very sensitive when people try and bring out comments that could be interpreted as being anti-Semitic.
When I've heard some Democratic observers say that doing this gives someone, Congresswoman Omar in this case, who has been very damaging to the Democratic brand, just more publicity. What do you say to that?
I think that she's getting more and more well-known. I mean, you know, we see a lot of the young people that have come in as freshmen have been very effective in being very well-known. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Omar, they're some of the most they're more well-known than I am well-known. And I've been doing this for a long time. So that's a positive in a way, but now you have to take that notoriety and use it in a positive way to address very real problems we face in our country and in the world. And I think that this is a great opportunity for her to demonstrate leadership. You can't continue with these type of, I believe, irresponsible comments.
The Democratic presidential candidates have been coming to her defense. Senators Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand, they've all expressed support for Omar. Do you think she is the best person for them to rally around?
You know, listen, people have to choose what they're going to do. The problem that we have in our politics today in America for both Republicans...
Would you do what they've done?
No, I'm not going to defend this comment. I think this comment was wrong. I think it was a mistake. I don't think it should be done.
Do you think it will hurt them in their election bids?
No, because the problem in America's politics today is that for the Republicans, they have far-right votes in the primaries. For the Democrats, the far-left votes in the primaries. And this could appeal to the far-left part of our party. That's why we need to stand up and recognize we're all Americans. We're all in this together, and we need to figure out how to address problems that exist in our country and in our world. And anti-Semitism is a real problem in our country and in our world, as is Islamophobia, as is all the other issues that we're talking about in today's messaging resolution. But we have to stand up and clearly call things that are wrong, regardless of the politics.
So the vote on the resolution was actually supposed to happen yesterday, and then it was pushed to today, and the clock is ticking here because Republicans could put forward their own amendment on a similar topic. Are you worried that they could condemn anti-Semitism while Democrats are in this mess, in this intense mess, wrestling over how they do it?
Well, you have to remember that we had a motion to recommit just a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember the date, that the Republicans put up, and the Democrats voted for overwhelmingly to condemn anti-Semitism. So it was very clear that people are taking a very strong position on this. We need to continue to do that and call out anti-Semitism every time we see it, and call out racism, and call out Islamophobia, and call out all the other things. But we have to be very clear in this instance that we cannot...
But are you feeling the pressure to do this before they can, before Republicans can?
I hadn't even considered that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's very interesting. Congressman Tom Suozzi, really appreciate you being on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Brianna.
Michael Cohen is facing questions about whether he lied to Congress about seeking a pardon from the White House. Will all of his testimony now be called into question? And in the midst of a national debate on immigration, the president's former chief of staff is speaking out and breaking with his old boss in a big way. Cohen is facing new questions about whether he told another lie to Congress. Cohen directed his attorney, Stephen Ryan, to ask about the possibility of a presidential pardon last spring, just weeks after the FBI raided his home and office. But take a listen to what Cohen told a House committee last week when he was under oath and under penalty of perjury.
I have never asked for, nor would I accept, a pardon from President Trump.
Well, we have former House Intel Chairman Mike Rogers. He's a CNN national security commentator with us, and senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security, Carrie Cordero. She is a CNN legal analyst. Okay, Chairman, listen to what Republican Susan Collins said about all of this. And Michael Cohen couldn't have been more direct in what he said. I have never, right? This is what Susan Cohen has said about this testimony.
If you find out that he asked the Trump team for a pardon, does that change your opinion of him or his testimony?
If Michael Cohen asked for a pardon, I do think that that is problematic because it casts doubt over the veracity of all of his testimony.
Do you agree with that, Chairman?
I do, and for this reason. He came under a cloud of suspicion. He had a pretty big hurdle to get over for the credibility piece, that he would be telling the truth. And in that open hearing, there was a lot of personal animus that came out in that hearing as well, right? Which I think taints
President Trump for him.
Yeah, toward President Trump, which I always think taints your, you have to be careful about taking those kinds of things as any degree of seriousness because of that personal animus. Now, if you add this in, he's already lied to the committee once. I think this would be big trouble for his credibility. You'd have to go through and prove every allegation with lots of physical evidence at that point.
What do you think?
I think that the staff of the committees, they'll go back and they're going to parse very carefully exactly what the words are that he used, and then determine whether or not they need to call him back or ask him to clarify his statements in writing. I mean, I think there might be an argument that if you take the exact statement that he said, I did not seek a pardon, versus what's being reported that maybe he asked a lawyer to go ask about it, that potentially could be a technical difference and it wouldn't actually fall under perjury. But it's certainly, I think there's a strong argument that it affects his credibility, just the fact that there might be some discrepancy.
Well, and that's what I want to...
court of law either.
That's
so
right.
He's in this court of public opinion, which had this cloud. I think clearly the threshold is a little lower. If you damage your credibility again, what that means for Congress's way forward on using his testimony.
Because that's what you need to square, right? Was he being extremely, was he splitting hairs, right? Was he being extremely literal? Because any reasonable person who listened to what he said would have taken that to mean that it was not asked about or a pardon was not inquired about, just in general, even on his behalf,
even
right?
Contemplated.
But and to be clear, let's say he said he didn't ask for a pardon. His lawyer, Lanny Davis, said that Cohen's former lawyer inquired about it.
And so I think one of the best ways that perhaps the committee could proceed would be to ask him to clarify. They could do that in writing and lay it out. They could ask him to come back again, and that way they need to get a record. But it's certainly, now that Michael Cohen is in the position that he's in, it is in his interest to be truthful. And that last hearing in open session was the opportunity to be truthful.
I guess I wonder, why would he lie about this? Because there were he came and he said things that clearly did not make him look good. And I wonder, was there a reason to lie? Because it seems like with the president granting a number of high-profile pardons, this might not have come as a surprise if he had solicited this. Why would he lie, Chairman?
Well, I mean, I think a couple of reasons. And dealing with people in my former life as an FBI guy, you know, some people will lie for a whole host of purposes, including to get out of jail. And so you have to be really careful about when they're in that mode of, I am trying to protect myself first, and I know what you want. You know, they'll be great ringmasters. I know exactly the kind of information you want. That's why I was really interested in how all that personal animus come up. Trying to paint a picture that I would love for you all to go back to the prosecutor and tell them how great I was, so that maybe my 3-year sentence is two-year sentence. And that may all be appropriate. It may all be accurate, but now you have to go through and prove it. And I think the reason he was trying to be, he wanted to be the victim in this. I would never ask nor never take a pardon. You'd rather go to jail for 3 years or take a pardon? Important. You have to calm him down, get the information, and now I think they're going to have to go back and prove every single allegation with something other than his testimony.
Carrie, I want to ask you about the former White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, because he's made a number of headlines. He spoke at Duke. He talked about on the travel ban. He said the administration got in front of its skis on declaring a national emergency at the border. Thank goodness, he said, we have this thing called courts. On the unusual deployment of active duty troops to the border, he said, I would always look for another way to do it. On the border wall, don't need one from sea to shining sea, and that migrants are, quote, overwhelmingly not criminals. We've heard something like that from him before about the not being criminals, though he's also said some disparaging things about migrants. What do you make of all this?
I don't know. Mr. Kelly had a tenure at Department of Homeland Security when he was the secretary, where many of the aggressive measures that the administration has taken came to fruition, and that the groundwork for the ill-conceived and poorly implemented family separation policy, that groundwork was laid when he was secretary and then when he was at the White House. So it is difficult to hear at this point, given his role both at the White House and at the Department of Homeland Security, that now he is somewhat potentially, and I'll have to read his full remarks, distancing himself from all of those policies. On the other hand, it is not unusual for a senior leader or an advisor to a principal or to a president to personally disagree with policies that are implemented. So he certainly, now he's out of government, and so he's free to say what he wants. But he was very in the middle of these specific policies for quite some time.
Carrie Cordero, Mike Rogers, thank you so much to both of you. Coming up, President Trump nixing a rule that requires the U.S. to publicly report on civilian deaths in drone strikes outside of war zones. Did he just give the U.S. more power to kill in secret? Plus, more on our breaking news, a surprise in the 2020 race that Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown is not running for president. Rolled back another Obama-era reform aimed at government accountability. With an executive order, the president ended the mandatory public reporting of the number of civilians killed in drone strikes, non-military drone strikes outside of war zones. Tom Donilon is the former national security advisor to President Obama, and he's joining us now. Thanks for coming into the studio with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
When you look at this repeal of this provision, which, and we should be clear, this is reporting civilian deaths, but in non-military drone strikes and in areas that are not considered war zones. So we're talking Yemen, Africa, Pakistan. What's the effect of getting rid of that?
Well, I think it reduces transparency and accountability, right? I think it's a mistake, frankly. And, you know, and it's a pattern, isn't it, of reducing transparency. You see it in the lack of a White House briefing every day. You cover the White House, right? And not to have a White House briefing at all for weeks is an extraordinary thing, actually. You saw it in the refusal to answer the questions about Saudi Arabia and the Magnitsky Act. So this executive order, which President Obama put out in 2016, asked for an annual reporting by the DNI on the number of strikes that were taken, lethal strikes that were taken, right, and the number of civilian casualties. And I think it just makes sense that the United States is not just another nation. I think that, Brianna, is kind of the theme here that I'd like to get across. We hold ourselves accountable, and we actually undertake extremely careful efforts not to kill civilians, and it undercuts that.
Do you think that with this repeal, more civilians will die?
Well, we don't know, right? You know, we won't have the same level of accountability. I'll tell you this. When you do have this level of transparency, when you do have this level of accountability, of publicly reporting on this, you do have outside groups take a look at this. You put pressure on yourself and the government. And as you know, I oversaw for a number of years our counterterrorism efforts in the United States government. It makes you better. You ask harder questions. We have an example right now. The Pentagon under General Mattis undertook a really serious study last year of civilian casualties. Why did they do that? Because there was a discrepancy between what they were seeing in their own reporting internally and what the external entities were reporting, the NGOs. And that discrepancy caused the Pentagon to undertake a serious study as to doctrine and accountability and investigatory methods to ensure that we can do better.
And part of that may be because what is the definition of a civilian? So and the NGOs may be more liberal in that description. So to play devil's advocate here, I want to ask you if the effect of repealing this is more of a value statement about transparency, or is it effectively going to mean more deaths? I know you said it's hard to tell, because human rights advocates will actually, they'll look at the Obama-era policy, which the president did just months before leaving office, and they'll say, you know, it wasn't particularly transparent. They wanted something much more transparent. That one didn't have the names of the civilians who were killed. It didn't say the areas or even the countries where they were killed. And again, it was unclear exactly what the definition of a civilian was. They felt that the Obama administration had moved the goalposts on that. Is it a value statement or is it a real change?
It's both. It's a value statement in that the United States, as I said, is not just another country, and we really should hold ourselves accountable and hold ourselves accountable publicly when the United States engages in a lethal action which kills a non-combatant. We should take that on. We should do it transparently and in terms of accountability, and we should make amends if we can. But it's also an effectiveness statement. We will be more effective. We will have less civilian casualties if we have more transparency. And last, the programs will be more sustainable if, in fact, the American people have a sense, right, that we're being candid and that we are doing things in the way that we say we're going to do them in terms of following the very tight procedures that we put on. But you can't get zero casualties, Brianna.
Well, and I should say, you, especially in your tenure as National Security Advisor, you supported and would speak openly about support for the drone strike program. And we should put that out there, that it's necessary. But you're saying it was controversial and people are not going to sign on or be okay with it if it's lacking transparency.
I think transparency and accountability adds to the ability to get support for these programs, which are needed to combat terrorism. So I think it is values, I think it's effectiveness, I think it's sustainability. It's a mistake.
On North Korea, since I have you here, State TV has aired this documentary, and it is lauding the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. It leaves out the failure on the negotiations, but at the same time, North Korea is reportedly putting back together long-range ballistic missile facilities that it had dismantled. So where does that leave relations at this point?
Well, let's say a couple of things about it. First of all, I don't think that the summit was well prepared. We didn't really have a set of fundamental things on which we agreed, including even the definition of denuclearization. So that's the first point. Put that aside. Second is a really important analytical point, which I think you're getting to, which is that the program, despite President Trump's statements, and by the way, I'm for reduced tensions, and we should wish him success in this, but his statements that we are not having missile tests and we're not seeing nuclear tests, that doesn't mean the program is frozen. So the fact of the matter is that the program has been progressing the entire time since the Singapore summit. And so this analytical mistake that I see the president making, saying, I'm in no rush, is not correct, because the program has been, in spite of the revelations which we saw